everyone, my name is Karen, this is my channel Rather Be Reading, and today I'm bringing to you my November marked as to read video. So just in case you're new, my marked as to read video is a video that I do each month where I just talk about all of the books that I was inspired to mark as to read on Goodreads over the past month. So it's not a TBR. I don't know when I'll get to these books. Sometimes I end up getting copies on audio or I manage to get ebooks and I will be reading them in the coming months, and then sometimes I may not get to them for 4 years, so there's no guarantees. But they are all books that I want to read at some point because I'm excited about them. So we're going to talk about what the books are, where I heard about them, why I'm excited about them. So let's jump into it. So I actually only marked 7 books as to read in November, which is a very reserved number for me, but I actually have 9 to talk about because I don't know what happened in October. For some reason I realized after I filmed my video last month that I left 2 books just completely out of that video, so I thought I'd touch on those quickly before I got into the ones from November. So the 2 that I missed out from October were, the first of those was Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. So this is a book that's just been everywhere on BookTube for quite a while. It's very popular, and I realized that I'd never marked it as to read. And it's a literary fiction. I believe it deals with a young female character who lives in the swamps or something like that and living a very hard life. But then it's also got like kind of a murder mystery aspect to it. It's been very praised and I'm interested in it and have been for a long time. It's one of those ones that I didn't realize I'd never marked as to read, and so I rectified that in October. And the second one in October that I forgot to talk about was The Heart Principle by Helen Hoang, which is the third book, like companion book to her Kiss Quotient and Bride Test books. This one is following the character Quan, who is the cousin of the main male character in the first book and the brother of the main male character in the second book, and he's a character I really have enjoyed in both of those books, so I'm very much looking forward to reading his story. So I put that one as to read in October. Okay, so now to get into the 7 books that I actually marked as to read in November. So the first of those I saw on a Goodreads blog post about November anticipated reads, and that was In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. So Carmen Maria Machado wrote another book of short stories called Her Body and Other Parties, which I was very interested in when I heard about it. I talked about it in a marked as to read video like back in the day. And I am still interested in because it deals a lot with the violence committed against women and women's bodies. But the more I hear people talk about it, the more I'm like, will I like that? Because it sounds kind of like absurdist or surrealist in a way, which is not always my thing. But then I saw this book and I was like, oh, I'm interested in that. But at the same time, it sounds like it could be kind of absurdist or surreal, not absurdist, but like more surrealism in a way as well. Which again, I'm not into, but I'm always intrigued by the premise of her books. So this one is actually non-fiction and deals with the abusive same-sex relationship that Carmen Maria Machado had. So it deals with that, which is a topic I'm interested in, particularly through the lens of a same-sex relationship, because we don't always realize that it's not like there's such a stigma that violence in relationships is men, or abuse in relationships is typically men against women, when it can be women against men or women against women or men against men. It comes in all different forms, and so I'm interested in it from that. But I also, from what I understood, this has got something to do with the stories being told through the lens of like horror stories or something. I don't really know. Like I said, I'm very intrigued by it, but then at the same time I'm kind of wary. So we'll see. I'll get to it at some point in the distant future probably, and then I'll know. So the next book I marked as to read is another one that I saw in a Goodreads blog post. This one was an interview that they did with Lisa Jewell, Lisa Jewell is a thriller, like domestic thriller author, and they did an interview and she actually did a recommendations of, was it domestic suspense. And so there was one on there that I hadn't heard about before called Stop at Nothing by Tammy Cohen. I think it might be a recent release or like a November or December release maybe. And it's about a woman who, her daughter has an act of violence committed against her. I think a sexual act of violence, but I'm not sure. And then the man who committed the crime goes free for some reason. and the mother decides, I think she runs into him in the street, and it just says that she decides to take matters into her own hands. And I believe it's about the repercussions and stuff that come with that, but like in a thriller type way. From what I understand, sounds very interesting. As we know, if you've ever seen a video on my channel, I'm very interested in rape culture, and rape culture and the issues of violence and sexual violence against women in our society. So definitely interested in that one. The next one is another book, like similar to what I was saying with Where the Crawdads Sing, that it's just a book that I always thought that I already had marked as to read on Goodreads, and then I came across it. I looked something up about, someone was talking about it in a video, I can't remember who it was now, and I looked something up about it, can't remember what it was, and I realized that I'd never marked it as to read, and so I rectified that situation. And that is Heroine by Mindy McGinnis. Heroine? It's not heroine. It's heroin, but like with the E as in like a heroine in a story, but ties into, I believe, heroin, the drug, because this is all about the path of becoming addicted, I believe, to prescription medication. I believe it follows a teenage girl who is a softball player or something like that. She's some kind of sporting person, and she is involved in a serious car accident that leaves her with a serious injury, which is going to affect her future in her sport that she plays, and she gets prescribed a prescription painkiller as a part of that, and starts to abuse that prescription because she's trying to push herself to recover as quickly as possible, because she's worried about how this injury is going to affect her future, and starts to abuse the drugs, and that becomes an addiction. And it's all about, I think it really shows the path of how your normal everyday person can end up being this person who's addicted to like opioids and things like that, which is definitely a problem in our culture. So I've always been interested in that book. It's always sounded intriguing to me, and like I said, I just realized that I'd never previously marked it as to read. Next, I realized this month that Spell on Wheels, the graphic novel, is getting a sequel. It's getting a volume 2. This is a graphic novel that's basically about 3 witches, like queer witches, and it's kind of a revenge road trip, the first one is, and it was just a standalone graphic novel because I believe it's kind of like a self-published graphic novel. Kate Leth is involved in it, and Kate Leth, I know Kate Leth mainly through her work on the Buffering the Vampire Slayer podcast, and I really enjoy her parts that she does on that. And I think I first heard about the graphic novel because of her work on that, and I read it and I really, really enjoyed it. And like I said, I don't know if it was announced this month or I just heard about it this month, they are coming out with a sequel. And so I hit that to read button on that. I think it's coming out like early to mid 2020. There's a child's tale. Don't lick my feet. That tickles. So yeah, I marked that as to read. Very excited about that one. The next book that I have to talk about that I marked as to read is another one from a Goodreads blog post. This is a blog post that they do like every week or so about books hitting shelves that week, and I came across this non-fiction book that just sounded really interesting called The Season, A Social History of the Debutante by Kristen Richardson. So it's basically just it's a non-fiction book, like I said, about looking at women and debutante balls and about women coming out into society, but across, I think it's like 6 centuries, and through, I think, different cultures as well, because I know it talks about Africa in there as well, and so I think it looks at the idea of women like being introduced to society from a lot of different cultures and time periods, which I just think sounds incredibly interesting. So I marked that as to read. Next, I read this article that was about the 35 best books of the past 10 years. And so I saw that article and I clicked on it and was looking through the books on it, and as with most of those articles, they're all books that you would expect to be on there. Like, they're all books that even if you haven't read them, I'm not saying like, I've clearly read all those type of books. No, I just mean they're all books that you've heard of at some point, with the exception of one. I was like, I've never even heard of that book. What is it? And it's called The Orchardist? Orchard. No, it was pronounced Orchard, so it'd be The Orchardist by Amanda Coplin. So this is a historical fiction about it's a man who I think works on an orchard, and I think he's living like kind of a solitary life, kind of a loner, and he's in town one day at a market and he sees these 2 girls like steal something from the market, and they seem you know, like they're living a hard life, and he sees them steal. And then I think it's like a couple of days later or the next day or whatever, and these two girls arrive on his farm looking for help, and he decides to help them. And I think then some men turn up on the farm looking for the girls. And it's kind of about that story. So I don't know, that just sounded very interesting. Like I said, the fact that it was on that list and I'd never even heard of it, I was just like, okay, well, I need to know more about this, and so I marked it as to read. And then the final book that I marked as to read in November was one that I heard about from Simon over at Savage Reads. So this is called The Mating Habits of Stags by Ray Robinson. It's a literary fiction. It's about a man who I think is in like his 70s, and he's was a farmer. He's widowed, and I believe he is on like the run in some way. Like he's trying to avoid capture from something, and I think we like go back and we're looking at his life, and I presume the events that led up to him being on the run. It just sounded very interesting. Simon always has a way of talking about books that I wouldn't necessarily be interested in if someone else described them to me, but he describes them in a way that makes them sound incredibly interesting to me, and like I want to read them. And so that's what happened with this one, and I marked it as to read in November. So that's it. Those are the books that I marked as to read. I would love to chat with you guys in the comments down below if you've heard any of these books, if you're interested in reading them, or if you've already read them and have thoughts on them. I would love to know. I would also love any further recommendations. If you know of a book and you're like, you know what, I think Karen would want to mark this as to read, you're probably right, because God knows I love to mark books as to read on Goodreads. So please give me any recommendations down below. Please like this video if you liked it. Please subscribe if you want to see more from my channel. That is all I have for this video today. Bye guys.